Hey folks, welcome back. Kirby... Oh my god. Could it be? The clock doesn't lie. It's Halloween month. I can't believe I completely forgot about it. I gotta change my wallpaper. Hey folks, welcome back. Halloween is October, the best month of the year. The temperatures start to drop, the trees turn all sorts of beautiful shades and lose their leaves, and best of all, the whole month is capped off by the celebration of all things spooky, Halloween. And what better way to celebrate the month of frights than a month-long Idiot Ben's Spookathon? And when I say month-long, I mean at least 2 episodes. I'm a busy man, I don't have all the time in the world to be making YouTube videos. Oh man, I haven't been this excited for Halloween since last Halloween. But I find myself in a bit of a dilemma. What should I talk about? Well, what do you say that we set the old idea machine to spooky and see what it has for us? God, this thing was such a stupid waste of money. Zombies. Who doesn't love zombies? Right? Zombies are still cool. Okay, maybe zombies don't really have the same impact that they once did, what with the massive oversaturation of them in the late 2000s and early 2010s. But you know what? Even if zombies have lost some of their oomph, there are still a lot of really good zombie games out there. The Last of Us, Left 4 Dead, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and of course, the granddaddy of them all, Capcom's Resident Evil series. You know me, I'm a huge fan of Resident Evil. I played them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 7, 8. No one does horror quite like our friends over at Capcom. Countless series have been indirectly and directly influenced by Resident Evil. Now let me go on a completely unrelated tangent for a minute. I promise it'll make sense in the end. It's the mid to late 2000s, and a whole new generation of home video game consoles is upon us, with the Nintendo Wii, Sony's PlayStation 3, and Microsoft's Xbox 360. Nintendo was off doing their own weird shit for the entire generation, leaving Sony and Microsoft to duke it out. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, a lot of people would probably lean toward the PS3 as the obvious winner, but that wasn't really the case in the early stages. Compared to the original PS3, the 360 was cheaper, sleeker, the controller actually fit into a grown man's hands, and most importantly, the 360 had a lot of solid exclusives. Gears of War, Halo, Blue Dragon, Viva Pinata if you're into that kind of thing. And of course, one of the biggest exclusives for the 360 was Capcom's next big foray into the zombie genre, Dead Rising. Dead Rising has always been a game that's intrigued me, but unfortunately I grew up in a strictly Sony household due to the fact that Bill Gates beat my uncle to death with his bare hands. So let's just say that Santa wasn't bringing me any 360s anytime soon. But thankfully, Dead Rising was developed by Capcom, who I imagine must not be very fun to work with if you're interested in publishing exclusives, because eventually Capcom will figure out a way to put their games on anything with a power source. Basically what I'm saying is it's on PC now, so. Dead Rising, folks. Dead Rising was released in 2006 as an exclusive for the Xbox 360, just under a year after the console originally hit the market. It was an exclusive for a whopping 2 years before Capcom, as Capcom does, decided that they liked money enough to make a port subtitled Chop Till You Drop, which was released on the Wii. But either way, zombie game, you get the gist, let's get into it. The game opens with a shot of a helicopter flying over a mountain range. Inside said chopper is our protagonist, Frank West, a freelance photographer and journalist, and he looks like this. Frank finds himself flying above Willamette, a fictional town in Colorado that has recently been quarantined by the US government. Before we get into the real meat of the game, the human meat, if you will, we get a little tutorial style segment where Frank takes pictures of zombies doing what zombies generally do during an apocalypse. It's kind of nice because taking pictures is actually a real core mechanic of the game, and this gives you an opportunity to get an idea of how it works without being in any danger. Frank tells the pilot to pick him up in 3 days before jumping out of the helicopter onto the roof of the mall, somehow without breaking his legs on impact. We then meet this guy, Carlito, who doesn't eat nearly as many apples as I would expect from a guy named Carlito. Carlito vaguely implies in his vaguely Hispanic accent that he knows about the zombies, and then Frankie heads into the mall where he finds, you guessed it, Zombies. A group of survivors are trying to barricade the front door, so Frank helps them, and he takes note of two people in particular. Girl Carlito over here, and this old man hiding behind the, you know those like steel curtain things that stores and malls put in front of their doors when they close? I never worked in a mall. These two are important for later, so just keep them in your noggin. Unfortunately, before Frank gets the chance to help block the doors, this old lady lets all the zombies into the mall in an attempt to save her poodle who's stuck between the doors. So that's why stores never want you bringing your dog inside. It's in case of zombies. So great. If there's one thing I hate more than a shopping mall, it's a shopping mall full of zombies. Thankfully, this guy, Brad, shows up and tells everybody to head up the stairs into safety, which no one does except Frank. Here we meet Jesse, who's after a shootout with Carlito, Brad reveals to Frank that he and Jesse are agents from the Department of Homeland Security, looking for the old man that Frank took a picture of at the beginning of the game. As the game goes along, the story unfolds, obviously, and it's pretty buck wild. This girl, who I mentioned earlier, reveals herself to be Carlito's sister, Isabella, and she tells the gang that the old man is Dr. Russell Barnaby, a scientist who conducted experiments on livestock in her home village of Santa Cabeza, somewhere in Central America. Dr. Barnaby's team set up a secret lab in Santa Cabeza with the goal of using genetically modified wasps to mass-produce cattle in response to growing consumer demand in the United States. Obviously, this did not go as planned. One of the wasps escaped the facility and caused an outbreak of zombies in Santa Cabeza. Carlito released the wasps into Willamette, Colorado as an act of revenge against the US for essentially destroying his hometown. And so there you go, that's why this mall is chock full of zombies. It comes full circle. So that's a general overview of the plot. And when you think about it, it's actually surprisingly deep. Like, the United States establishes a secret lab in Central America to conduct illegal and immoral experiments, and worst of all, they blame it on the Central American drug trade. Does anybody else smell a metaphor, or is that just me? But you know what, enough analysis. I can only take a game where the protagonist looks like this so seriously. The plot is definitely interesting, but where Dead Rising shines is the gameplay. So without further introduction, Arthur, hit that music. Dead Rising, from an outsider's perspective, probably seems like a pretty standard game where you kill zombies in a mall. However, let me assure you, it's one of the weirdest video games I have ever played. Certainly not in a bad way, but it's weird. Trust me. You'd be surprised to find that this game actually has a lot of mechanics, so let's get right into it. Obviously, the game sets you loose in a zombie-infested mall in the fictional town of Willamette, Colorado. And when I say zombie-infested, I mean zombie infested. There are seriously zombies up the ass in this mall, and unfortunately Frank didn't bring any sort of protection with him. So, I guess he'll just have to improvise. One of the biggest mechanics of Dead Rising is the fact that damn near anything in the mall can be equipped and used as a weapon to fight the hordes of zombies. Benches, shelves, lawnmowers, skateboards, cash registers, swords, gardening equipment, mannequins, parasols, shopping carts, and that's barely scratching the surface, man. There are a total of 141 weapons at Frank's disposal. And that's honestly a big reason that this game is so fun. It encourages the player to run around finding different weapons and seeing what they do. Some are very effective, you know, like guns, katanas, chainsaws. Others are not so effective, like Teddy Bear and Toy Sword, but I mean, like, what did you expect? But regardless, for a first-time playthrough, it's a ton of fun to try out different weapons to see what you like and stuff. And the game also encourages you to try out weapons through the use of very light RPG elements. You get experience for doing stuff like killing zombies, reading books, completing missions and side quests, etc. And every time you level up, you get little upgrades like speed increases, inventory expansions, more total health, you get the picture. You also unlock special moves like a jump kick, the ability to climb on a zombie's shoulders, and so on and so forth. Apart from the combat, the other main mechanic in Dead Rising is photography. If you pay attention closely while playing, you may pick up on the fact that Frank is a photojournalist, either through the camera that he carries everywhere with him or the fact that he never shuts the fuck up about being a photojournalist. Photographers, am I right? Unless you're watching this and you're a photographer, in which case, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about... It's every other photographer that's annoying. Taking pictures is another big part of Dead Rising, and it ties into the whole leveling system I just talked about. When you take a picture, you gain experience based on the quality and framing of the photo, and there are 5 bonuses that give you a boost in experience. Horror, which refers to pictures with zombies or just generally scary things. Outtake, which refers to funny pictures like a zombie falling over or pushing a shopping cart or something. Drama, which refers to pictures of dramatic events. I don't really know how to better explain that, honestly. Brutality, which refers to pictures of blood and gore. And finally, erotica, which refers to pictures of boobs and butts and stuff. Don't give me that look. I didn't make the game. Now, you might think that stopping to take pictures of stuff would be a pain in the ass, especially considering how many zombies you're dealing with on the regular, and you would be right in thinking that. However, the game gives you a lot of opportunities to get a good amount of experience through photography. There are locations throughout the mall that have these little camera stickers on them that give you a bunch of experience. And there are also certain instances where if you take a picture in the right moment, you'll get a huge chunk of experience. I personally really like the way that the whole photography mechanic is implemented in this game, because you don't really have to take pictures if you don't want to. It's just a good way to gain experience. Plus, the addition of photo ops and stickers and stuff is great because at the very least you're probably going to take pictures of that stuff, so it keeps the photography mechanic from being completely glossed over. So yeah, you can use whatever your brain can possibly come up with as a weapon, and you take pictures of zombies in lingerie. Sure, that's common knowledge stuff. But that's not even what makes Dead Rising one of the weirdest games I've ever played. Like I said, good weird. No need to lose your mind or anything, it's just a video game. What makes Dead Rising a weird game is how it's structured, how the actual game progresses and works. So let's get into that, because it's kind of my favorite part. So as I said before, when Frank jumps out of the helicopter at the beginning of the game, he tells the pilot to come pick him up in 3 days. It is therefore obvious to assume that the entire game takes place over the course of 3 days. But here's the thing. Dead Rising literally takes place over the course of 3 days. You have a total of 72 hours to accomplish as much as you possibly can in this mall. Now you might think that that sounds restrictive and annoying, and I can certainly see how it would be in the wrong game. But let me tell you, Dead Rising does it very right. The main storyline is broken up into what the game calls cases, each of which activate at different times of the day. These are the only missions that you have to complete to beat the game. So here's an example. Case 1 begins on day 1, September 19th, and expires at 5 p.m. meaning that you have between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. to complete all 4 submissions within Case 1. Case 2 doesn't begin until September 20th at 6 a.m., which means that at the very least you have 13 hours to kill between main storyline missions. Now, I mean, what the hell are you supposed to do for 13 hours, right? You can't go shopping, it's like Black Friday in here. Well, at the beginning of the game, right after we reach the safe room, this guy Otis gives you a walkie-talkie and tells you that he'll call you if he spots anything important on the security cameras. So basically, as you're running around doing whatever between missions, or during missions for that matter, Otis will call you up and activate a mission for you. These missions either come in the form of escort missions or boss fights. Alright folks, little impromptu sidebar here. I have some negative things to say. And you know me, I don't like ending on a negative note, so just bear with me while I point out the 2 single things that I don't like about Death Stranding. I mean, Dead Rising. So as I'm sure you can tell, I love Dead Rising, but there are 2 things that I genuinely dislike about it, and both things revolve around Otis. Good job, buddy. You know what, I'm just gonna say it. Why'd you have to make the black guy the most annoying character, huh? Could've just as easily been Jesse. Could've just as easily been Jesse. So throughout Dead Rising, Otis always be calling you on that fucking walkie-talkie. No matter what you're doing, no matter how many zombies you are surrounded by, Otis will call you. And the worst thing is, Frank can't multitask at all. So if you're talking to Otis, you can't do anything while he's talking to you. You can't even jump. You also can't skip through dialogue, and worst of all, you can't hang up because if you get interrupted somehow, the mission doesn't activate. And if that wasn't bad enough, if you hang up on Otis or get cut off somehow, the next time he calls you, he's mad at you. He's like, "Don't hang up on me, you paparazzi son of a bitch." It's so infuriating, man. It almost comes off intentional, like they were trying to make you hate this character. And it worked. I do. When you're trying your best to get through a horde of zombies, worst of all at night, Wait a minute. Did I mention that the zombies are stronger at night? The zombies are stronger at night. When you're trying your best to get through a horde of zombies and that motherfucking walkie-talkie rings for like the 4th time in a row, it makes you just want to throw your goddamn controller out the fucking window, Otis. I'm a little busy at the moment, buddy. Like, why do I have to listen to all of it to activate the mission? It's not like anything he ever says is important. Hey, Frank, you're in Wonderland Plaza. Did you know there's a roller coaster there? Like, yes, Otis, I can see the roller coaster. It's not like the hints he gives you matter. Every mission has an arrow that points you to where you're supposed to go. And that leads into the other thing that I'm not super huge about in Dead Rising. The escort missions. So one of the 2 things Otis notifies you about are civilians hiding in various stores throughout the mall. Again, all these missions are optional to be fair, but if you feel like getting a big experience boost, you can escort said civilians back to the safe room. Now, escort missions are generally about as fun as repeatedly beating your head into a wall, even in the best of games, and Dead Rising is no exception to that. The NPCs you are tasked with escorting are the dumbest motherfuckers on planet Earth. They just walk into zombies, try to fight the zombies, get caught by zombies. Sometimes they get like stuck behind walls and you have to go back and direct them around. Like, watch Isabella here. She just walks right into the crowd. If only there was some sort of opening. I'm starting to think that these zombies aren't actually that big a threat. I think these people are just fucking stupid. Okay, that's out of my system finally. Negativity over. I love Dead Rising. So this mall is absolutely crawling with zombies, right? We all know that. What you may not have known, though, is that this mall is also absolutely crawling with completely fucking insane people. Psychopaths are the other main type of mission in Dead Rising, which is just their boss fights. Psychopath is the word that Dead Rising uses to describe bosses for whatever reason. So instead of missions, side missions, experience points, and bosses, we got cases, scoops, prestige points, and psychopaths. What the hell are you guys doing out here? Just talk normal. Much like the other missions, the boss fights are set to a schedule. Some expire, some don't. And it's really just a wacky cast of characters. You got the grocery store manager with the weaponized shopping cart, the sniper rifle family that kill people for no reason, the crazy Vietnam veteran guy who thinks everybody's Viet Cong because, of course, every piece of media has to have a Vietnam veteran in it. And, of course, who could forget the double chainsaw-wielding clown boss whose name is Adam. Adam the Clown. Again, the majority of these guys don't necessarily need to be killed if you don't want to, but it's certainly made worth your while if you do. In addition to getting a ton of experience from them, you also sometimes get access to special weapons and stuff. Adam's chainsaws, Cliff's machete, and the prisoner's giant machine gun and their truck all respawn indefinitely for the rest of the game. And if that wasn't enough, well, actually, I didn't really have anything more planned to say about the boss fights, and that's Dawn of the Dead, a video game about a mall. But I feel like I haven't really expressed to you how I truly feel about this game. So, let's... You know, when I first started playing Dead Rising, I gotta be honest, I wasn't really getting it. The game just kind of throws you in, and I mean, it teaches you the mechanics and stuff, but I still found myself like, what do I do? Where do I go? Am I supposed to be taking pictures of stuff? I don't know how to read an analog clock. This is too many zombies, man. I'm just gonna come out and say it. It was only once I completed the first main set of missions and realized that I had 13 hours to kill between then and the next set of missions that I really figured out Dead Rising. While there isn't necessarily a correct way to play the game, I believe that it's intended to be structured like this. Beat the main story mission in as little time as you can, so that you have as much time as you want to dick around and have fun with everything else that the game has to offer. And honestly, that might be a valid point of criticism for some people. If you go into this game totally blind, the first hour or two might be confusing or stressful. And I mean, to be fair, the game could have added some stuff to make all that a little bit more clear, like perhaps a timer up here rather than just like a bar that indicates how long you have to complete a mission. But enough of that criticism bullshit, because Dead Rising is an awesome game. It is so much fun, and it rewards you so much for exploring and trying different things and stuff. The story is silly and perhaps takes itself a little bit too seriously, but it also has this thin veil of irony and self-awareness the whole time, you know? It's very theatrical, it makes a lot of jokes about bad situations, and most of all, I mean, you know, I feel like you gotta err on the side of self-awareness when your main protagonist is this guy. Like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or whatever, but like, Frank is a weird-looking dude, right? That's not a controversial statement, is it? He's got a stupid haircut, his outfit is bad, his face is kind of busted looking. In fact, what's kind of interesting about Frank is that the game's producer, KG Inafune, actually wanted him to be, quote, uglier and fatter than he ended up being, but Capcom said no. The point was to make him an everyman, someone that anyone can relate to, along the lines of Harry Mason or James Sunderland. But Frank is different, you know? Making him so weird-looking is actually kind of an interesting and rather effective way of making relatable. Like, I mean, I'm rooting for him, aren't you? That said, I also like this game for reasons other than Frank. The concept of mall full of zombies is far from a unique storyline. In fact, just to avoid legal issues, a ton of copies of Dead Rising were released with a little disclaimer on the box asserting that the game had no ties whatsoever to George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. That said, I don't think Dead Rising gets enough credit for the sheer amount of innovation it made when it first came out. Zombie games obviously existed before Dead Rising. Hell, Resident Evil was made by the same company. But I don't think that any game, at least at the time of this game's release, had ever portrayed a zombie apocalypse in such a scale in the way that Dead Rising did. Like, the thing about zombies is, on their own, they're not really that scary. They're slow, dumb, you can kill them with a good enough blow to the head. Zombies themselves aren't really scary. It's when you multiply them by 1,000 that they become terrifying. And due to technical limitations, and also for the sake of maintaining a certain tone, Resident Evil always had to go different routes for driving home the impact of a zombie apocalypse. Resident Evil 3 did a really good job with this with the design of Raccoon City. Without even seeing zombies, you can tell that this city has been pretty much irreversibly f***ed up. What I think makes Dead Rising so special is was the fact that it took the concept of a zombie movie and translated it into a video game better than ever before. And what better game to show off the power of the next generation consoles than Dead Rising? Look at how many zombies are on screen at once, man. It's insane. And on that note, I'd like to take a little anecdotal personal segue here, if that's okay. When I was a kid, one thing I liked to do rather than making friends was to come up with ideas for video games. And one of those ideas was a crazy over-the-top comedic zombie game hinged around the concept of using DIY weapons like a lighter and Axe body spray, just as one example. To tell you the truth, it was primarily influenced by Shaun of the Dead, particularly the scene where they dress up as zombies and sneak through the horde. I always thought that would translate well to a video game. And I think the reason that Dead Rising left such an impression on me after beating it is because I realized this is kind of what I was imagining. I mean, think about it. Every area has hundreds of zombies, anything can be a weapon. Frank can wear an endless supply of ridiculous costumes, all of which he's still wearing in the serious story cutscenes, which is awesome. And on top of that, the game has such a good sense of humor. It perfectly toes the line between horror and comedy. Overall, I could go on forever about Dead Rising. It's quickly become one of my favorite games, and I can't recommend it enough. Honestly, I'm shocked that it took me this long to get into Dead Rising. I mean, I love zombies. Within reason. Now, some of you are probably thinking, Ben, what's the name of your hypothetical zombie game that you came up with as a kid? I'm glad you asked, dear viewer. The answer to your question is Zombie Smackdown, which is a hilarious name. I'd still think that, so I will not be accepting any criticism of that.